Hello everyone and welcome to Records Rebuilds, your number one source of Corvette double salvage craziness. You may have noticed that the left front wheel is pretty dinged up and out of place. So this video is going to be about getting that wheel back to where it needs to be so that we can move the car around the garage. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do to get this project started off right is to get this wheel off here. You can see obviously the caster is way off. That's because our top A-arm there is bent. The rear leg of that A-arm is actually broken. So we'll be pulling the wheel off here, and we've got to replace that A-arm. Once we do that, this will be a car that can drive under its own power. It'll be easier for me to move around the garage. So that's our goal. Alright, so now that we've got our wheel off there, we can see the problem with that A-arm. It's obviously badly bent. You know, it's cracked in half right there. So once we get this fixed, get this thing operational again. Amazingly enough, the tire over there, there's no puncture. We have full pressure in the tire. But yeah, that's our next step, is to get that top A-arm replaced. Alright, so I've got a little bottle jack position underneath that lower A-arm just because I don't want this to suddenly come loose. It's not going to, but I just always do that. So we got a leaf spring putting downward pressure on there. So we'll get this nut off here, and then we'll use a special tool to separate that A-arm from the front knuckle there. So I did a bad job of showing this last part. Sorry, I'm learning. So basically you're going to find, you'll get this nut all the way unthreaded, then you'll thread it back on just a bit here. Then you're going to use something, this specific tool, it's in the General Motors manual for doing the job. You're going to put it on just right like this, in this orientation here. Sorry, there. And this bottom part you're going to put on top of that nut that you've threaded back on to the end of the ball joint there. Then you're going to tighten this bolt. Dang it. Tighten this bolt at the top until you'll hear it pop all of a sudden, and then your A-arm will be free like this. You take the bolts out of the front side and the bolts out of the back side. So you can see here in comparison to that new A-arm just how bent the old one is. Okay, so we've got these new A-arms in here, and we're just going to tighten them up. Last thing we want to do is cross thread those holes in the frame right there. So, and then we'll bring this down and we'll get that ball joint right in there. So the way I finally ended up getting this in there is I took the A-arm and I bolted it to the frame first, and then I used the bottle jack underneath the lower A-arm. And that allowed me to bring this ball joint up high enough where I could fit it in the hole on the A-arm. So that was a bit tricky. I had forgotten how to do that. So anyway, that's the way that goes. Okay, so this took me a little more time than I thought last night. The big problem that I had is that when you get this A-arm in here, the ball joint just wants to spin when you're trying to tighten that nut on it. So the solution to that is that there's actually, on the bottom of that ball joint, there's actually a hex head slot there. So you just stick an Allen wrench in there, and that will hold the ball joint solid, and then you can tighten the nut around it. So you're going to need some sort of a ratchet or a wrench that allows you to have a hole in the middle of it. So you can stick the Allen wrench. Again, I hope you can see this up. The Allen wrench goes up inside that bolt right there, and that holds the U-joint steady, and then allows you to tighten the nut on there. So next, we're just going to be torquing these down. It's going to be, let's see, for each of these bolts here, that's going to be 48 pounds of torque per the GM manual there. And then for the big nut down here underneath on the bottom of that ball joint, for that nut, you're going to torque it to 22 pounds, and then an additional 120 degrees after you get to 22 pounds. So we'll be doing that next. Okay, so we've got our wheel back on. We're going to be torquing the lug nuts down in just a little bit. It looks really good just looking at it, but we can check the alignment later to see if, you know, we think the frame's bent or anything like that. But it's looking good. I'm going to call this task number 1 of a long rebuild completed.